Welcome back.
Cool. Thanks, James. Happy to
I don't know why I keep on now introducing, but yeah, podcast episode number 7.
we okay?
Yeah.
7.
Crazy.
The year's gone by. I think we'll have 11 by the end of the year. I think we missed
Yeah,
January.
because
Yeah.
we started early Jan, so then first one was Feb or so. Yeah.
No, we already had a book. We already had a book that I'd liked from the year before attached.
Yes, yeah, that was a good one.
Hmm.
Okay, so today's book, The Last Arrow, and the subtitle is Save Nothing for the Next Life by Erwin Raphael McManus. I think he normally just goes by McManus or Erwin. McManus, yeah, so I don't know if you want to give an intro to the book or if you want me to.
No, you can give the intro to the book.
Cool. So The Last Arrow by Erwin McManus is a book that begins with a biblical story in 2 Kings 13, where Elisha tells King Jehoash, I think, to strike the ground with his arrows. So he strikes 3 times and then he stops. As the story goes on, we find out that he stopped striking the ground too early. Had he continued to strike the ground till his arrows were done, he would have had victory over the Arameans. But instead, now they would only wound them. So this story is the reference story for the book. And McManus looks at different areas of life and he motivates us to keep going until we have nothing left, until we have pretty much given everything we have to give, and effectively until we've used up our last arrow.
Yeah.
So he says here, there's 2 little quotes. My intention for this book is that you would never surrender, that you would never settle, that you would save nothing for the next life. And then another quote is that this book has one intention, that whether you win or lose, succeed or fail, live a life of celebrity or anonymity, that when you take your last breath, you will know without reservation that you have given everything you have, everything you are, to the life that you have been entrusted with. Yeah, that's the book.
Yeah, it's about dying with an empty quiver.
Yeah, an empty quiver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an interesting take, especially with the king striking the ground. I think somewhere in the book he made a reference to that some people give their all when they're doing something, but yet the king had everything. But I think it's about when you're comfortable and when you're not. When you're not comfortable, let's say you're struggling or anything, you move everything, you do everything to make things happen. But when you're comfortable, you do the bare minimum, and at the slightest hint of struggle, you then stop.
Yeah.
And which is what he said happened to the king. He thought striking the ground was somewhat, to put that in air quotes, of a struggle, that he only did it 3 times. And I think somewhere in the book it goes, he probably would have been happy if he hit the ground 5 times or 6 times.
Yeah.
But why was he angry with 3? But it's that whole thing of he felt that the king didn't give it his all. He still had more energy to go, but yet he gave up.
Yeah.
And I think this book is about not giving up as well. Be our best selves, as we do everything. I think it talks about that as well, that in all we do, we have to make sure with our best selves and we give it our all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I must say that I think for me, there's parts of the book that I really find quite interesting in that, and there are parts that I will have to, because we spoke about it a little bit before, the motivational side of it I sometimes struggle with a little bit, and so I'll do my best to not comment on that too much. And I think other people would feel similar in terms of like the Christian undertone of the message. So that's fine. But I think that there are lots of valuable parts of what he's saying, and he's definitely a very passionate person, and he very much is the kind of person. He's not I mean, if you read the book, he's not someone that is like, do the stuff and then he doesn't do it. Like he goes for maybe a little bit too overboard for my taste, but he really goes for it, and he's got some seriously interesting stories that he comes across along the way.
But I think you should then dive into those parts where you're like, no, I disagree with this. I think that's the thing. Should make it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think it's I haven't put my finger on it yet, because pretty much everything in the book, there are some parts that I would disagree with, but in whole, like, I agree with most of the stuff. It's just like it leans very far on that motivational side, and that's where I like to just like think through things, and but I also like to be inspired a bit. But then when it's like the whole book is inspiration, then I'm like, nah. But it's been good as well for me to try and dig into something like that and try and learn how to appreciate
different forms,
different mindsets and things like that as well. Yeah, because some people, you were saying that this kind of book really like hits home for you or resonates with you, and I think that it's good to get those different perspectives as well.
No, I mean, there were parts where I read it, I was like, ugh. I mean, like the Samuel not telling the truth part about what is it about? There's nothing new under the sun part.
Yeah.
I read that part and I was like, I think I embodied Kim, the wife, in that moment. I was like, but I think I understood what he was trying to say. That, and I think so often, even in our work context, we chat about it, and I think we've spoken about it, that every solution there is out there in terms of like software is there. It's just a matter of doing it efficiently and better. I don't know if you agree. Okay, you don't agree, but
there's a lot of things that have been solved.
Let me not say
together.
everything, yes, but I'm trying to say that, let's say, for instance, in the bank sector, all banks probably rely on the same fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
Let me backtrack. I think if someone had the last one, just forget I said that last bit.
I agree with that part.
The set of fundamentals, right? And there have been solutions for those things, right? But year after year, I believe there are people working on those same stuff. Doesn't mean that it's something new, but it's just to better or refine that process.
Yeah.
Is what I'm talking about. So I think in the context of Samuel, that's the reference he was making, but that didn't sit right with Erwin, because he felt that if you put yourself to it, there will be other things you can create or discover that have not been discovered yet. Remember, he said once he made that, the first time he gave that talk, he was pretty much, in today's culture, I would say he was cancelled after that. And what he did was then he went to create stuff. So that's when he focused more on his clothing line. He focused more on his production company, in the hope that I'm here creating new stuff. Samuel said there's nothing new under the sun, but I'll prove him wrong. There are new things under the world, under the sun.
Is it Samuel or Solomon?
It was
Solomon.
Samuel, I think.
I think it's from Ecclesiastes. Anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Solomon, yeah. Yes. It could be. Yes.
It was someone
It
somewhere.
was someone with an S. Whose name started with S. But yeah. So it's again, like I said, when I started reading that part, I was like, ooh, but I got his point, and I feel like I also got where the reference was coming from, and I think it's about perspective. Depending on the context you're in, you can always say something. And I mean, he further on to say, I think he tied it on with the Cuban trip he made, that when he went to Cuba, he felt like he had stepped back in time.
Yeah.
And it's that
where
thing,
he says kind of, if people think time's is
progressing at the same
progressing,
time, but in essence, we all progressing at different.
Yeah, so then he
speed.
uses the example of like different countries being almost in different eras of history. Even in the present moment, it's
Yeah.
like some countries are more in the 1500s, some countries 1800s,
Yeah.
some countries modern times, and then you go to Japan and you're like, whoa, there's all this new stuff. You go to some other country that's sort of more rural, and you're like, whoa, this is like living in the 1000 BC or something.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just a little
But
background.
I mean, in that moment, it was like they've been held back in time, and it's as if this is all that you ever know. You see, they were kind of living that statement, even though that wasn't their intention, but that's the reference he made. But on the other hand, the other world is like, there's, like you're saying, go to Japan, like there's tech in Japan, apparently what he said, that we don't even know will ever exists, but that they're using it. So yeah, but yeah, to my point, I was like, when I started reading that, I was like, you're cutting it a little, so, yeah, just thought I'd say that.
Yeah, but on the whole, I think it's a very there's lots of interesting parts, and he's like we said, he's been to some seriously interesting places in his life, and we were talking earlier as well. He's definitely got the travel bug.
Yes.
But the cool part is that he seems to be very interested in when he travels. He engages with people, so he meets people and he tries to sort of figure out other people's stories and make sense of it from his sort of, I guess, worldview. So it's very cool. Okay, should we dig into the
book itself?
book? Okay, so the book is broken down into 10 chapters. Maybe I'll just read the titles of the chapters, and then we will dig into like 3 or so of them. So the first is, the intro is the battle. So basically, the background to him actually writing this book is that he is battling with cancer at this point in his life. I think he made it through and he's fine and stuff. But so the stuff that he's talking through in this book, he actually doesn't bring up cancer quite a lot. I was expecting him to bring it up quite a lot in the book, but interestingly, he doesn't bring it up too much. But that's the underlying sort of...
I think he only brought it up one other time when he's talking about when you're CEO and they wanted to insure a company, and that's the only time he kind of
and then they found out that he wasn't able to be insured because he had this indicator of cancer, and he was like, no, when I test it next time it'll be fine. And then it wasn't. But which is interesting. Modern medicine and modern insurance policies. So that's the battle. And then the point of no return is a story about basically they go swimming, and maybe I won't dig into that too much. I'll maybe just read through the titles and then we can chat through the ones. So point of no return: save nothing for the next life, choose the future, set your past on fire, refuse to stay behind, act like your life depends on it, stand your ground, find your tribe, know what you want, and battle ready. Cool. Okay, so let's dig into some of those. Because each of them have very interesting stories, some of which, because I may or may not have read the book very late, some of which have vanquished from my memory. But here are some of the ones that I think I kind of somewhat remember. Okay, so the point of no return is the one chapter that we'll look at. So this is the one where, and just jump in at any point because I'm going to highly paraphrase the story because of my poor memory. But there's 2 people and they are... I think it's in a movie that Erwin watched. So there's 2 people and they're going for a swim, and the one brother is like, I think, a high achiever, and he's the sort of...
I think he was also comparing himself to his brother.
In parallel. So he's a high achiever, and he's like the one who is the... I can't remember all the things, but he's probably the fittest and he's the strongest and he's the best swimmer and all these different things. And then they go for a swim, and then all of a sudden, the other brother, the one that's sort of Erwin is relating to, who's the weaker brother or whatever you want to call it, he ends up swimming super fast and is basically overtakes the brother who's supposed to be the good swimmer or whatever. And so, long story short, the brother that's normally the high achiever is like, what is going on here? And eventually, when they get sort of towards the middle of the ocean, the guy's like, how is this happening? And he's like, well, or he says, how are we going to get back to shore? And then he says to him something along the lines of, like, I've given everything up to this point, and like I basically gave it so much that I wasn't planning on getting back to the shore. I was just going for it. Which I don't know what to think about that story, but I think it is quite a powerful idea to be like, the reason why he was able to do better than the person who was supposed to be the stronger swimmer than him is because he just gave it absolutely everything. He wasn't worried about how he's going to get back to the shore. He was just like, I'm going to go for it now while I can. Interesting story.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, I think just going back to that story of Elisha and, striking the ground, what he did was exactly what was expected of the king. If we relate swimming to striking the ground, he's hit the ground with his oar. And to him, those nothing holding him back. He was like, if we're doing this, I'll do it with my oar, And I think I know I'm jumping a bit, but it's like the title is the point of no return. It's like you do all the work, without, as you've said, thinking of, I need to go back. But if you notice, the next chapter after that is save nothing for the next life.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll use that same swimming reference. Is like he wasn't worried or didn't ever cross his mind that he has to swim back. Because the moment if it did, then he would have been like, I'll save my energy for swimming back. But if you look at the next chapter, if you save nothing for the next life, it's like whatever you get, you do your best at executing it, and I feel like that story is perfect picture for saving nothing for the next life, because you don't have a set point in future. You don't tell yourself like, like in 10 years I need to have done this. It's like, if we're gonna do this, we'll do it right, and you just put your oar in it. And that's exactly what the one brother did. He swam like his life depended on it.
Yeah.
Which at some point it did, because he needed to go back to shore. But yeah.
No, I think it's a very powerful illustration. I still like with these kind of things, I'm always like, but what happens? Like you should be planning for the going back and swimming back, because you don't want to like not have any energy so that you can't make it back and things. But I don't know if Erwin would be very happy with me saying that. But I still feel like there's that element of it that one needs to take into account. But I do think most of the time we lean towards the too much. We like sort of keeping too much cautiously.
Yes.
We should go for it more, basically.
Yeah. No, like I think, reading it is like, I mean, there are various chapters with the same underlying message, pretty much. And like I said, about the next thing of saving nothing for the next life, I think, to me, I feel like growing up was a very cautious person. I didn't take risks growing up. And it's exactly that, So like, it's always you try to be very calculative. Like, and I think we need to also draw the line. We don't have to be stupid about it, to be like, if you have food today, eat it all. You have to still account for that. But I think there are certain points in life, that if, for instance, opportunity come your way, you can consider, but if you have to take that opportunity, take it. If it means you're making certain sacrifices, like, let's say, not necessarily deplete, but use most just of your savings towards it for a better future. I feel like it's a no-brainer, because our savings, again, it's like saving to what point? Like, I'm not against saving. Like, we should save.
Yeah.
When you can. For those trips. But it's that thing of where, when life comes at you and you need to make that decision to dig into those savings for a better future, I feel like it's a no-brainer not taking it.
Yeah.
Especially if you trust and the opportunity is good, and the only hurdle is, let's say, finances that you might have, but you think you need to hold on to. I think you need to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we most of the time, we either like saving way too much or not saving at all. And I think with most things in life, there's that balance. And yeah, if we're literally just putting money aside for some future that we're never going to act on, then that's not good. And we should be acting on, whether it's financially or whether it's like, okay, you've built up a set of skills and you're working as a, whatever the classic example would be, like a waiter, and you want to become an actor. If you just sort of keep building up your actor skills, but you never actually try and audition or something, then you doing yourself a disservice. You're not going to be living to. I'm not going to mention it to try and live your life to the full. I think it should be pushing towards that direction more than we normally do.
Yeah.
Cool. There's some interesting quotes that he had that I thought maybe we could just chat through. So one of them that I liked was, he says, "I never found a way around failure, and so I can't teach you how not to fail, but I can guide you to a place where you'll never quit." And I think that's it's a helpful frame of mind to have. And I think some of the books that we've discussed kind of lean on that a little bit, but to say, okay, I'm gonna go for the not quitting part. Basically just continuously putting in effort. And again, there's still wisdom. There's still places where it makes sense to quit. But for the most part, we basically give up. And he has another...
Just before you go on, like...
Yeah, go for it.
That's actually... As much as this sound or look similar, they're very different. Like, you actually said two things. It actually just sparked something in my mind.
Okay,
like,
cool.
Giving up and quitting.
Okay.
Quite different. No, but I'm not taking away to your point. I'm just adding to your point that, like you're saying, at some point you need to have the wisdom to be like, this is not for me. I need to step back or step away from this. You know? But giving up, I feel like, is very different from quitting. Giving up is you knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but you're like, I can't anymore.
Yeah, it's too much effort.
It's too much effort.
It's too difficult,
You give every excuse not to finish or do what you want to do.
And I mean, this is another quote, but it ties back to that. He says here, "I wonder how many times in my own life I thought that I had failed, but actually the only thing that happened was that I quit." Because, sometimes we give up. Okay, it's using the word slightly differently to what you... I like your clarification, actually. But So when we stop pursuing the thing that we know is actually good, then because it's too difficult, we often think, it made sense to stop at that point, and like maybe you didn't achieve the thing that you wanted to, whether it was like, I don't know, some people aspire to become like lawyers and this and that. Like if you didn't finish your law degree, but you really wanted to become a lawyer, but you gave up because it got difficult, maybe you failed a year or something like that, and that was like really taxing, then giving up in those circumstances it's something that we must try and push ourselves through to not keep on giving up. Okay, then there's another one where he puts here, you have no control over whether you've been endowed with above average talent, intelligence, physical attributes. What you can control is whether you choose to live your life defined and determined by the status quo. And to kind of maybe put it differently, you can choose to continuously work at stuff. And despite what other people think and say, and it's like, oh, okay, that's a silly path to go down, or it's not worth the effort and stuff. If it's something you care about, then continuing past the status quo, what everyone thinks should be expected of people, or what people think is reasonable, I think that's a helpful frame of mind to have. Okay, then I've got one last thing here on this chapter, which I liked the way that, so it's the way that he talks about arrows and how you can think about them as continuing the metaphor. So he says, most of us live our lives as if the arrows are too valuable to shoot. They look so nice inside the quiver. We may even take extra time each day to organize our arrows and make sure that they're in perfect condition. What I love about arrows, in contrast to other ancient weapons, is that while you may use a sword, it never leaves your hand. But the arrow only has value if you release it. It travels where you have not gone yourself. The arrow extends your range of impact and only fulfills its purpose when it's set into flight. We are not supposed to die with our quivers full. In fact, our greatest aspiration should be to die with our quiver empty. Those who never settle have the mind. Those who never settle have the mind. Have the mindset. I thought it was a dash. Have the mindset that they are saving nothing for the next life. And in a sort of loose sense, I really like that idea, because often I do things where, like, maybe I'll get a new piece of technology or something like that, and it's so nice and pristine that I just don't want to use it. Like, I just want to make sure that it stays in its box, and if I ever take it out, I'm like super cautious with it and stuff like that. And I'm sure that in different ways, different people do the same thing. And then I remember watching I don't know if you've seen Casey Neistat. I remember watching a video of his where, and you and I were into photography at some point. And he's like a big YouTube vlogger, photographer, videographer person, filmmaker, you might even call himself. And so he basically gets cameras and pretty much everything, and he doesn't care about them, maybe almost too much of an extreme, but he treats them as tools to be used, rather than as these like things to not be touched or stuff. They made to take videos, to go out there, like go into the rain if it's waterproof, go into the rain and use it, and don't be scared of like getting a scratch here or there. Just use it. And I think I lean way too much to the other side, like too much cautious, not doing things, not using things that I have either gotten or yeah, I suppose mostly it is material things, but I'm sure that there's other ways that I don't do that. But yeah, so it's just something that I need to get better at.
I just remember that of that an arrow is only valuable once it leaves, your hand. Like that's very powerful, and like what you're saying, it's like you get something and you just wanna wipe it down, put it back in the box, and it's like no, it's only valuable if you actually use it for what it's intended for. Like you're saying, go out and shoot pictures, take pictures, shoot videos.
Don't worry about the shadow count. It's fine. If the camera dies because you used it too much, that's not a bad thing.
That's good because you're actually using it. You're getting your values worth. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you have anything else from that chapter that you want to...
Nothing else. Just want to read a few things from the next chapter, which I feel like just also
go for
highlight some of the things, like in the next chapter it talks about
what's the chapter
that's called Save Nothing for the Next Life. It talks about we can become so afraid of death that we never live, so afraid of failure that we never risk, so afraid of pain that we never discover how strong we really are. The reason why that stood out now, it's just you spoke about that now, about the whole failure, quitting, and all that kind of stuff. And this exactly describes that, that we limit ourselves and we don't understand our full potential because we don't want to take those risks, so... Yeah, there's some interesting parts for Save Nothing for the Next Life. But like I said earlier, that the chapter that we spoke on now, ties in with that you have to give your own now, back to that camera reference you made. It's the same way of you buy a camera, you wipe it down, and you're like, at some point I'll use it. It's like, why don't you start now?
Yeah, go for it.
Like, go for it now. And something else here that I highlighted in that chapter is the moment you choose to play it safe, you have lost the game. Instead of running from your fears, lean into them. For on the other side of them is the future you long for. You see, like, again, like, the fears are now, overcome them, and, like, the future might be different, so yeah, that's some of the points from Save Nothing for the Next Life that I feel tie in with point of no return. I think the point of no return is about making that commitment. That's where it all starts. Like I said, I feel like the chapters are very well interlinked.
Cool. I think all of the stuff ties well back to. It's a very short story. From Kings, and then he ties it back to it quite well. And even I listened to a brief thing by Charles Spurgeon on the same sort of passage, and he sort of ties it back as well to pretty much the same thing, which was quite surprising to me because Spurgeon is someone who's very, he's like a very, I don't know, reformed, cautious person. Maybe cautious isn't quite the right word, but he's like a
reserved.
Reserved. And then McManus, I think, leans towards the other side a little bit more, like on the sort of liberal side. And there can be sort of pros and cons on both. But it was interesting that they both tie it back to the same sort of point in the striking the arrows idea, where you haven't basically given it your all. And then Erwin sort of likes to use the phrase "save nothing for the next life," which is so he leans on that phrase sort of saying something similar to someone like Spurgeon in a different way, which is just it's an interesting thing that different people with very different viewpoints would converge on a similar, similar way of thinking through this story. But yeah. Should we look at the Act Like Your Life Depends on It? I can't remember what chapter it is, but that's the title of the chapter. That's the important part. Okay, so
it's chapter 6.
Okay, cool. So I'll start off with one of the stories that he has in the book, and it's a story about people with leprosy. I think it's also one of the ones taken from the Bible. So basically, it goes along these lines. 4 men with leprosy sat at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there and we'll die. And if we stay here, we'll also die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender." Now remember, they were having the fight with the Arameans. And then they said, "If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we die." Then Erwin comments on that and he says, "I just love the optimism of this observation. It would be bad enough to be a leper. It would be worse to be a leper in a time of famine. And if it were not bad enough to be a leper in a time of famine, it would be even worse to be a leper in a time of famine in the middle of a war." So very bad circumstances. And even further, it would be worse if you were on the side of the war that was losing.
Which
they were. Yeah. And yet the 4 lepers locked outside of their city, 4 lepers who have been forgotten and abandoned by their own, 4 lepers whose bodies are being eaten away by an incurable disease, but whose minds are still sharp, at least sharp enough to understand their options. There was only one option that they had, even the slightest prospect that would sort of give them even the slightest prospect of life. And it was the option that required them to take the greatest risk and the greatest courage. So he carries on there and he basically says that what these lepers did was they were like, "Look, we could go this way, we're going to die. We could do this, we're going to die. Let's just go for it and go to the
enemies.
Our enemies." And then, long story short, they go to the enemies, but then the enemies are actually gone from the camp, and then they can get a bunch of stuff, not condoning robbery. And then,
robbery, but yeah.
Yeah. But long story short, they acted like their life depended on it. And they took steps because it was like they couldn't really do anything else, and they were just like, "What can we do? Let's just go for this because we've got no other choice." And I think what Erwin is saying is the point that he's trying to get at is that we should, if we want to try and
succeed,
live full lives, we should think about it in the way that our life depends on it. And remember, in the background of his mind is his cancer diagnosis, where he's, because I'm assuming when he was writing this chapter, he knew about it as well, because I think it was throughout the whole book.
It talks about, his levels and stuff. But
okay, yeah. And so, yeah, we should be, not forgetting that this life comes to an end at some point, and so to try and do things that it's not just sitting on the couch is probably not a bad idea.
Those options, those 3 options that the lepers had were like very interesting, but just to add on, he talks about both came to a point of clarity where they were like, "No, let's go back to the city and tell them."
Oh yes, yeah. It's after they had taken the other
stuff, but they're like, "Why are we doing this?" So it's like, and I think at the end it talks about how, because they acted like their life depended on it, and in essence, their life did, because they were like, okay, we die. Uh, each scenario leads us to our death, but if at the slightest they capture us, they'll still feed us. I think that was their logic behind them. And I think at the end of the chapter it talks about just because they made that decision, then everyone else benefited from it. I think when he's closing that chapter, it says that, because remember, if they hadn't gone back to tell the king that, look, the enemies have left, then the people would have still been locked up. You know? But at every step, they were mindful that their life depends on it. You know, I mean, what would have 4 people with leprosy done with all that the store? If you say we're not condoning stealing, but all that they took, you know, without permission, you know.
You go to prison and I didn't steal it, I just took it.
You know, just took it. So yeah, we really need to, and I think you put this well, we really need to at all times do things as if our life depends on it. You know, it's like the work we do, our life depends on it. But we need to, in that moment as we're working, know that we should give it our all because our life depends on it. Not in a scary way, you know, because when you always hear, oh, your life depends on it, it's always has a bit of a negative connotation to it. But the good in it, you know, that I need to do this because my life truly depends on it. Yeah, you know.
I mean, in some sense, it's the life depends on it idea is almost more helpful as a motivational thing. But in some sense, if we look back at our lives are made up of those pieces that we act on. So if we don't try and do our best in various scenarios, whether it's, in our case, writing code at work, or whether it's helping someone do something, or whether it's just being a good friend or good husband, wife. Those are the things that make up our lives. And so the idea of acting like your life depends on it, while it's not always completely true, like it's not like if I don't treat my partner well in this situation, then my life will go to ruins. If you do it too often, like your life will drastically change based on those outcomes. I mean, based on those decisions. So yeah, it does kind of tie back together.
I mean, on page 100 it goes, it makes one wonder how many times we choose to remain in our desperation rather than allow it to drive us to the abundance that awaits us. You know, in that sense, it's like...
Those are one of the cringy... Like, I agree with the point. I feel like he could have dimmed his words a little bit. But I said I wouldn't mention it, so I will try and stop that.
No, you can. Because, like I said...
No, but otherwise I'll just say it the whole time.
But yeah, it's... But yeah, act like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it is a good lesson to keep in mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
another cringy one then.
I'll be quiet.
On page 102, because fears like leprosy, that it's a way at your soul, and it will lead us to build fortresses that look like security and safety. And I think that's very true. I think as humans, we like security. We like to be secure, but again, we use it to mask our fear. You know, we might be afraid to step out of our comfort zone, and we say, "Oh no, we're secure here. We're comfortable here." But it's that thing of what else is out there? You know?
Yeah. I actually really like that one because I'll to read it a tiny bit more. So because the thing is with that point is we often confuse safety and security for
Comfort. Okay, I'll let you.
We often confuse it as a fortress, right? So we build up this, we have our home and we're comfortable and happy in our home and the people we surround ourselves, and we think that it's a fortress that we've built, but actually it's a prison that we've built. Now, that's not to say that building a family and a home and things like that can't be a fortress. Like, of course it can be, but sometimes we confuse those things and we think we've built a fortress, but we've actually built a prison. So I'll maybe reread it and then just carry on because there's like one or two sentences that. So it says, so this is what you read. Fear is like leprosy that eats away at our souls, and it leads us to build fortresses that look like security and safety. Fear convinces us that we've locked out the dangers that would befall us, all the while blinding us to the fact that it hasn't locked out the world at all. Instead, fear has trapped us inside ourselves. It was never a fortress, it was always a prison. So actually, I think that's a really good point. Don't build fortresses, do that, but don't trick yourself into building a prison and thinking it's a fortress, because that's not the place you want to be.
Like, don't convince yourself your prison is a fortress.
Yes, exactly. Any other sort of thoughts from that chapter?
Yeah, I think that's like.
Yeah, I think I've touched on the ones that I wanted to.
Yeah.
Cool. Should we look at the next one? Find your tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this chapter because it's about people and relationships, and you can see, I think, from the things that Erwin does, that he cares about people and relationships. So he loves doing all kinds of things like traveling and speaking and doing all kinds of things, which, he's a really, like we said earlier, he's a go-getter.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is that he's not someone who seems to be a go-getter that deserts everything that actually makes him who he is. He values those friendships, that, as he is calling it, a tribe of people, friendships and family, so I think it's a really good chapter. Should we read through some of the stuff there?
Yeah.
Okay, so find your tribe. One of the things he has is it's much easier to do something yourself. So the background here is just contrasting doing things by yourself and doing things alone, and it's very quick and easy to do things yourself, but when you do things with other people, you often achieve a lot more. That's why most of the time big companies achieve a lot more than sole proprietors and that. Not that you can't as a sole proprietor, but even in those kind of cases where you a person working on your own, most of the time you're working for a company. You're just like freelancing for a company.
Before you go, he talks about just that. It's the African proverb.
Yes, that's a good one.
And which references that. It's that if you had to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. Yeah, so a similar sort of idea. He says, it's much easier to do something yourself. It takes so much more work. It demands so much more of yourself to create an environment where highly talented, skilled, and intelligent people can work together for a common goal. So the way that I read it might have been unclear, but you can do something yourself, and it's quite quick and easy to do that. And so the easy solution is to say, I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to create an environment where people can thrive. I mean, in various aspects of life, like when you get a group of people together, there's bound to be issues and conflicts and things like that. But if you can build a culture that can get past that and can basically have it so that the people trust each other and enjoy working together, then it's almost inevitable that as a team or as a tribe, as he would put it, you will achieve a lot more and be more satisfied with what you've achieved because you did it with a group of people. Yeah, but it's difficult, but worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, just so he talks about the one guy, the producer, who, when asked, essentially, I'm not paraphrasing, but just to quote it loosely about it's like, what's behind your success, and he doesn't make references to himself, but he highly talks about his team, that he is where he is because of his team, and I mean, it adds to that notion that you need good people behind you, and I think he does talk about like all the successful people that he's met. There's always been a team that they've been with for a long time that have allowed them to be where they are. So I think for me, I did enjoy that section about find your tribe. And I mean, it was in the sense that, and it just speaks about how people don't, the one thing that they feel is very dispensable is relationships. When people want to move and stuff, they often forget that the reason they're in the place where they're at, let's say mentally or in terms of health, is because of the people they surrounded themselves with. And yet it's the first thing that you always go, oh, but I can make new friends. I think people don't really understand, the value of relationships around them. And I mean, I, for one, there have been several times when I've wanted to move, leave PE. But the one thing that keeps me around is the people that I have here. I have a very good, I think, I have a very good support system, and it's not even in terms of family, it's friends that have become family, and I could relate to what you're saying. And I feel like that stretches out in different contexts in terms of businesses. You don't have to be, that close, but you can still have a sort of relationship with your colleagues that unifies you. You are happy to be part of that company because of the wonderful culture it has, because of how they treat people. I think we as humans like to associate with good things. And if there's good coming from, a certain environment, you want to be part of that. And I mean, just thinking back to the last book we read, How to Think, there was that whole, what was it? How did they refer to it? It was not community, but outsiders and...
in-group and out-group.
In-group and out-group. And I mean, I feel like a tribe is like an in-group.
Well, I mean, as long as you don't take the negative connotation of in-group where you don't get caught so far in your in-group that you basically don't listen to other ideas and things like that. So,
or you can be an out-group with similar, let's put it that way. You can be an out-group, a group of out-groupers.
I think the term that he used was membership. Yeah. Where you want to so you don't want to be so obviously I agree with what you're saying, but just to go back to how to think books terms, I think he was saying that there's the in groups and the out groups and stuff like that, and being in those can be dangerous because of various things. But the term that he uses, membership, because membership, you are sort of part of something that's bigger than you, but you are a important part of it, to the degree that if you were to step away, it would affect that situation. It's not, you're not in such a massive group that you fade into the distance and kind of, you just form, you basically a collective ideology rather than actually a bunch of human beings. Sorry, I did a bit of a derailment there.
So I think I was at the end of it. But yeah, it's very important for you to find that group for yourself. You know, of course, not in the extreme way, but, you know, people that, you know, mean well.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that has a positive impact on people's life, far greater than we actually imagine. You know? I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that that continuous reflection on, it's not just you, it's that team, and that's the way that you, not that you even need to strive. I mean, okay, again, everyone would disagree with me, yeah, but it's not, to me, it's not that you need to strive for like absolute greatness to be the. I think he actually does think along these lines as well. He just expresses it differently. It's not that you need to strive for like being the best in the world. So for him, it's more striving to just fulfill whatever you can do. Like, not, you have certain capabilities, and most people don't use them to their full extent because they're afraid, or they have too much fear of like things might go wrong, etc., etc. But in order to get to a point where you feel like you're doing the things that you want to do, and you can kind of just do them without struggle, but you're pushing yourself and you're learning new things and you're growing. In order to do that continuously, you might be able to do it once off now and again by yourself, but in order to do that continuously, you need to have, like you were saying, that good team of people that you can trust and rely on. He says there as well that years ago, I spent a great deal of my time trying to understand successful patterns in business. I began to discover that often the initial idea of entrepreneurs is not their best idea, but what happens in that first endeavor is that they find their best people. They find people who are with them, whether their idea pans out or not. They find people who are with them in both the midst of success and the midst of failure. And I mean, I think that'll only happen if you have a good culture. But if I look at people like, actually, maybe I'm going to contradict myself here. If I look at people like Elon Musk, he might be a brilliant mind, and he knows quite a lot of stuff. And he seemingly can pick up things fast and put ideas together, interesting ideas, very well. But I still think that one of his strongest competencies, if you want to call it that, is actually getting highly intelligent people, very basically inspired to work with him and for him and help push towards his vision. Because I think he's smart enough that he's able to make intelligent people intrigued, and then he's doing really interesting projects, so it pulls those people in. And I think it's a certain type of person that can work for Elon. I certainly don't think I'm one of those people, but I think that the main reason why he's been able to achieve all the things, people will pin it on him and say, he's amazing, he's achieved a lot, and he definitely has. But one of the main things is that he is able to get a massive amount of really talented, smart people to push the idea of getting an electric car going, to push the idea of getting rockets launched for cheaper, and all of those different things.
I was gonna say, essentially, he's good at creating tribes.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's just that they surround brilliant ideas, which people that are intrigued then will be like, I want to be part of that tribe and execute those things.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tribes, a key thing.
Yeah, funny enough, like yesterday we were talking about this, how, I wouldn't mention name, but the one company avoids mentioning tribe because of the negative connotation that it may have down the line in terms of tribalism and whatnot,
Okay, yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
If we're too cautious with words, then we won't be able to say anything.
Anything.
But
But yeah, it's funny how, like you said, like now thinking about it, like, because the person was saying how he's noticed that that company has people that start companies for 2-3 years and they move on, but it seems like that's almost everyone. And it's
nowadays,
yeah, but it feels like other companies like a big thing, and it's like we forget that when you put certain things in place, we attract a certain group of people, but you need to accept them for all that they bring. So it just similarly seems like there's a certain group of individuals that you relate to or attract, but the downfall is that they have the culture of jumping ship every 2-3 years. It sounds bad, but it's just like that's just how those people or people in that group tend to live their life.
Yeah.
And you either have to, if that's not working for you, you either have to get to a point where you're like, hold on, something is wrong, we need to change something, or accept the fact that that's how your tribe rolls in some sense,
Yeah. And it's difficult to, if you want to change the way that a tribe or culture thinks, then it can be very difficult to do that. But to get whether you want that culture of getting new people in every 2 years, if that's what you're actually going for. I mean, most companies wouldn't be going for that, but even if you were, or if you wanted to get that long-term culture where people feel like, cool, I can build a career here, shaping the culture to the way that you, I guess, envision it to be helpful is really difficult, but it's worthwhile. Yeah. Cool.
Is there anything else?
No, I think if you have some concluding thoughts, then go for it.
Yeah, my concluding thought, I'll just think about even like just to add after finding your tribe, just touch a bit on Battle Ready,
Okay.
It was just an interesting thing that he talks about him speaking at the one event that it was just sprung on him, but the guy organizing said he knew the first time he heard him speak, that he could do the job. And it was just a matter of that. I think we underestimate the 0.1, like from Atomic Habits, that if you consistently do something, when that big thing is in front of you, you'll be able to do it. And like I said, he consistent, like without fail, whether there were 20 people, whether there were 300 people, he would stand up every Sunday and share. And I feel like, to me, Battle Ready is about showing up. Like, your job can be mundane and boring, but you showing up every day and doing what you need to do prepares you for when that big break comes. So that's like my concluding thought to the book as well, that, strike, not with all your strength, but with what you got consistently up until, if you use up until every arrow breaks, up until your quiver is empty, just give it your all, you know, because you, again, like you said, you live in nothing for the next life. You die knowing that you've done all that you could. And I mean, if, as he says, something else that he doesn't agree on, which I also understand him, that I feel like then for the afterlife you're prepared. You know, like I mean, to me, I always feel there's one scripture that only up until a few years ago I saw very differently, and it's John 3 verse 16. It's like, for God so loved that whoever believes shall not perish but have everlasting life. I think growing up, the way it was taught to me is like, do this for a better life, you know. But then a few years ago, that changed to be like, what if this is the eternal life?
Oh, as in like
Like
it's not like I think I get what you're saying. So you're not starting your life, waiting for your life to start then. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
we have to live it now. And I feel like the message from this book is exactly that. It's like, live out your life as best as you can now. You know, don't be like, oh, I'll do that there, and then I'll rectify myself, and then I'll have my foot in the afterlife. But no, it's like, live life as you always will now, and just carry on, you know. And I feel like the last Aaron said, nothing for the next life. It's exactly that. Like, we here, and if we don't live now, when, you know. Yeah, that's my concluding thought.
Yeah, I mean, my concluding thoughts similar to what you said just before that. I think most of the books that we've read, and probably some of the best life advice, is just being consistent in stepping forward in the direction that you want to go, being patient, slowly taking small strides, that 0.01%, keeping on going. And I think that will, if you take that thought, that idea, and combine it with what he would call tribe, what I would call like friendship, relationships, if you have those two things, then I think you will naturally be using up all your arrows. Because to me, those are the kind of things that life is about, where you continuously stepping forward, growing as a human being, and you're doing that in relationship with other people. And I think that he touches on a lot of those kind of core themes. And he might push more on rather than just taking continuous steps forward, like give it your absolute all. And I think in the modern culture and stuff of burnout and stuff, maybe I'm a little bit cautious towards just going absolutely full tilt. But more than probably I should. I can be reserved at times, and to try and push a little bit more, but do it in a way that you can do it constantly, I think I think that's one of the things that I've taken from themes in this book, but also a bunch of different books that we've read. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Peter. We'll chat again.
Cool. Cheers.